Gunpowder Milkshake can be defined as style over substance. In a very noticeable way, the new independent actioner by director Navot Papushado is a movie filled with visual flair in terms of colorful cinematography, elaborate costume design, and intricate studio sets, but it is severely lacking when it comes to narrative depth, meaningful character arcs, or having anything insightful to say. It is a movie with a lot of pop, but one that ultimately does not stick with the viewer. Sure, the film has a solid amount of components in its favor, its action is solid, the visuals are appealing, and it features some notable actors and actresses like Karen Gillan, Paul Giamatti, and Lena Headey, but Gunpowder Milkshake is missing a key ingredient. It is missing a good story. Admittedly, this absence of a deep narrative doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing. After all, many good action movies can be described as mindless entertainment. For example, the John Wick movies, a series that Gunpowder Milkshake is clearly trying to emulate, is a series that is light on story and has minimal thematic depth, yet it does have a hefty load of visual flair. It has a lot of different stylistic elements. The series features some awesome action, some solid cinematography, a cool performance by Keanu Reeves, and a neat bit of world building. And these are all elements that work together harmoniously, and despite the narrative's minimalist nature, the John Wick series' abundance of visual flourishes is worthy of admission alone. The same, sadly, cannot be said of Gunpowder Milkshake. Even beyond being skimpy on the narrative, much of the film's stylistic furnishings are missing in action as well. Many of the action scenes aren't very inventive, the fight choreography is abysmal to the point of being comparable to an independent backyard wrestling gig, the comedic relief is very cornball and childish, and the movie's world building regarding a secret society of assassins misses the mark worse than a stormtrooper. With all of these components, Gunpowder Milkshake is clearly attempting to ape the John Wick movies, but it doesn't have the creative finesse that those films possess. Where the world of John Wick is cool, suave, and contains plenty of intrigue, Gunpowder Milkshake is lifeless and lacks definition, and when combined with its non-entity of a story, the movie feels empty, just like my hopes and dreams. Gunpowder Milkshake's narrative alone is a complete bust. The plot follows Sam, a very skilled assassin and femme fatale. During the events of the movie, Sam is assigned to a specific job. There's a man who stole money from the firm, i.e. the organization that employs Sam, and Sam is tasked with killing him and returning the money. Admittedly, the job seems simple enough, but unfortunately for Sam, the hit runs into a complication. With his dying breath, the thief reveals that he stole the money for a noble purpose. A group of gangsters had kidnapped his daughter, Emily, and he planned to use the money he stole to pay off her ransom. And unfortunately for the thief, he is mortally wounded before exchanging the money, which leaves Sam in a bind. Internally, she has a dilemma where she must decide whether to return the money to her boss or try to rescue Emily despite consequential repercussions. Sam, because she is human, opts for option 2. Due to growing up with her own parental issues, Sam is sympathetic to Emily's kidnapping and decides to exchange the money for the kid. It is a good-hearted moral decision, yet it is one with dire consequences. See, the firm's HR man Nathan, played by Paul Giamatti of all people, puts a hit on Sam, meaning that the entirety of the firm's employed assassins are searching every street, hideout, and delectable hot dog stand for Sam and plot to eliminate her for a massive payout. And through this, Sam is clearly in danger, despite how she is a very capable contract killer in her own right, because a woman can excel in the profession of murder just as well as a man can. Taking on the entirety of the firm is a tall order. She badly needs help, and as a result, she teams up with her estranged mother and hitwoman named Scarlet and some of her past co-conspirators so that they can successfully combat the firm's army of killers, which is fun times for all, with the exception of the audience, of course. Gunpowder Milkshake's characters are flat. Whether it be the script, dialogue, or the framing of the narrative, the film is beyond underwhelming. The character arcs are very predictable, and the characters themselves have little in the way of personality, though maybe the film's kidnappers are holding that hostage as well. At no fault of the actors, the characters have little in the way of subtle nuances or more detailed attributes. Due to a weak script, the characters leave little to no emotional impact, and their minimal arcs are quite lackluster. The most notable of these uninspired arcs comes in the form of Sam's and Emily's relationship. Through them, the movie tries to convey a mother-to-daughter connection between these two characters, but the material here is too weak to get properly invested in. Sam and Emily become become attached to one another way too quickly to be realistic, and there is a distinct lack of quieter, tender character building moments where the two bond in a way that shows off any meaningful character growth, which is just unfortunate. See, in most movies showcasing an adoptive maternal or paternal connection, think The Last of Us or The Mandalorian or anything involving Pedro Pascal, to be honest, the relationship between parent and child has some friction that eventually eases over time as they get to know each other better. But in Gunpowder Milkshake, these all too important character building moments aren't present. The character development is missing in action. This becomes abundantly clear when taking Emily's dead father into account. Remember, Sam murdered him, and seeing as Sam dishonestly avoided revealing this little tidbit of information to Emily, there should be an unspoken dramatic sense of tension driven between the two. Despite Sam's maternal instinct to protect Emily, which again is a feeling that fosters way too quickly to be believable, there should be a sense of unease regarding Sam's inconvenient truth. There should be some drama. But there isn't. The character development between the two is so piss poor that the viewer can't help but become emotionally detached from the events on screen. Upon seeing Emily, Sam immediately transforms into her parental figure, and she doesn't really grow or change much from there. And to make matters worse, Emily is relatively unchanged after discovering that Sam killed her father. Sure, Emily is sad for a scene, but the kiddo gets over the whole "my new mom murdered my dad" hang up pretty quickly. It's almost as if it didn't even matter, despite how, and I can't stress this enough, Sam killed her father. And yeah, I get that this technically counts as a spoiler, but if the movie won't even take the emotional construction of its own characters seriously, then what hope do I have of doing the film's heavy lifting for it? Don't blame me, blame the film. Gunpowder Milkshake is additionally a thematically empty movie. Stemming from its female leads, Gunpowder Milkshake attempts to be a feminist actioner. The movie features a lot of strong, capable women beating the ever-loving snot out of hapless armed henchmen, and the movie revolves around two mother-daughter relationships, one the aforementioned Sam and Emily, and the other involving Scarlett and Sam, though their awkward dynamic receives far too little screen time in my honest opinion. But unfortunately, the movie doesn't stick the landing, even though it rightfully emphasizes how the movie stars women in prominent roles. Hell, the feminist library assassin aesthetic of some of the characters more than alludes to this. The girl power themes are just so painfully obvious and choreographed to the point of being eye-rollingly blatant. The movie just repeatedly bludgeons the viewer over the head like a Virginia Woolf branded sledgehammer. The feminist symbolism here is just gratuitous, which admittedly could have been a strength. As a feminist myself, I love female empowerment messaging, and as a critic, I don't view blunt thematic points as an inherent flaw. In fact, the recently released Marvel Studios' Black Widow wasn't exactly subtle with its feminist narrative and thematic messaging either, and that movie was good. Through good character development and a solid story, Marvel Studios' Black Widow earned the usage of these obvious and wholesome women's lib themes. But Gunpowder Milkshake, on the other hand, does not. Sure, the film similarly packages a female empowerment narrative inside an actioner, but the film differs in execution. See, Gunpowder Milkshake's feminism has little in the way of actual personality. As stated before, the film's core storytelling conceit involving Sam and Emily doesn't have its intended emotional resonance. And due to this, Gunpowder Milkshake's feminist narrative feels noticeably insubstantial. With Sam's and Emily's dramatic non-starter of a relationship, the strong feminine themes aren't properly represented to the audience, and despite the well-intentioned feminist messaging, the movie doesn't deliver a reason for the viewer to care or become invested in the story. It all rings hollow. By the end, Gunpowder Milkshake is a beautiful yet unimaginative movie. While its colorful cinematography and shot-on-studio style is visual comfort food, Gunpowder Milkshake revels in mundanity underneath its gorgeous sheen. Done in by a frail script, the movie's character development, narrative arcs, and emotional core is stunted. Even though it clearly had the potential to have strong feminist themes and characters, the movie is unable to pull it off. It is ultimately very flavorless. Alright, that was the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like rating and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell so that you're notified whenever I release a new video. Also, tell me in the comments what you thought of Gunpowder Milkshake or just movies in general. Additionally, please consider contributing to my Patreon page. The link is in the description, and every dollar helps keep this show going. And speaking of Patreon, I just want to thank my patrons, especially my high tier ones, and David Devlin and Mom. Thank you so much for supporting what I do. Love y'all.